Right, the VJM11. You can tell that because it says it on the side of the car there. This is a pink car. I mean, pink. This is seriously pink. Even pinker than it was this time last year, I think. Also, on the livery, whatever you think of the pink is fine. I don't like the livery. It seems it's just slightly weird with all these sections of pink kind of slapped on in amongst the white. Just a bit weird. A lot more prominent branding from BWT, of course. So hopefully that means they've brought in some more cash alongside that. But anyway, let me know what you think of the livery. Not my favourite, if I'm really honest. In terms of the car, though, this is a car that still, of course, has that Mercedes engine tucked in the back, which will still, of course, give them a huge advantage, we think, in terms of reliability going on previous seasons. When in 2018, when reliability is more critical than ever with the increased restriction on power unit parts per car. So the Mercedes in the back continues. That's an area of continuity. And this is a car that has quite considerable continuity. Definitely a sort of evolution from where they were. And not a dramatic one either. Some nice detailing around here, as we've talked about so much now. This has become a real hotbed of area of development for teams. The idea of this area of side pods and barge boards. Reasonably conventional side pods on this particular car. A bit narrower than in previous years. A slightly smaller opening, but still nothing like the tiny, slimmed down air intakes, side pod openings that we see on some of the other cars, like the Red Bull, for example. Some nice little trick details around the mirrors. I've got another picture to show you on that in a moment. And the nose, they've stuck with that sort of long, slim nostril shape at the front of the nose. Interestingly, the guys at Force India said that they think that the addition of the halo for 2018 has added pretty close to £1 million to their annual budget, to their budget for this season. And the reason they say that is not because this device costs anywhere near £1 million. Of course it doesn't. The reason they've had to spend £1 million extra is because to get this thing to work, and I have done another video on this, of course, if you haven't seen it, go check it out, is this particular halo device here has to pass excruciatingly tough static load tests. And that means they take this halo and this chassis and they put it onto a rig at a testing facility. They push down on this surface here and on different angles as well, different loads for different angles. But this one here, this vertical load test, is incredibly tough. Toto Wolff said the weight of that downward force is the equivalent of a double-decker bus resting on the top of that chassis, which is huge. You can't even imagine. When you see tests like that happening in the workshop, in the factory, or at the testing facility, it absolutely terrifies you as an engineer because you can hear the chassis creaking and groaning under these loads. And the rules say, the reason that this is so difficult is that the rules say under that load, the halo cannot deform in any way. But just as importantly, the chassis cannot fail in any way. And, that's a huge ask for a Formula One team because the mounting points here, here and here, you have to completely change the way that the structure of your chassis is laid up in the carbon fibre. Because normally it wouldn't have ever taken loads anywhere near that. Even the rollover hoop static load test, which has been around for years, isn't anywhere near as stringent as this halo test. So it means they've had to completely redesign not the look of the chassis to cope with the halo, but the integral design, the strengthening, the layup of the different layers of carbon fibre inside it and all the strengthening pads that have to be bonded in, fixing points and everything else. So it's a huge task, and that's why going through the R&D process, the testing process, and then of course the manufacturing process, they think has cost them around about £1 million. That's tough for a team that's struggling with budget anyway. Right, here's that nose cone then. Very different to most other teams, but very similar to what they had last year. And obviously these two nostril type slots If you've watched my other videos, you'll know by now this arrangement is all about feeding airflow through underneath the nose cone to this channel here, where you can just see the beginnings of the barge boards and the turning vanes around the front of the floor, or the bib section. It's a crucial area, this, and they're trying to feed as much airflow through there as possible. What you can also see from this shot is this little vane here, and this channel. You can see they're creating a channel through here, which is almost, you can see it's almost like a little, the edge of the diffuser at the rear. It's channeling the airflow through here and then almost sucking it in and feeding it straight into these areas to be worked through these barge boards and turning vanes back here. If you didn't have the nostrils, of course, much of this air, you still get airflow through here, but much of the air is being passed up over the top. What some of the other teams are doing is, instead of having a separate nostril arrangement, having a slightly higher nose and having two channels down here. I guess much of a muchness. It's just a preference thing, and the way that these guys have tried to make it work. Because they had it last year and it clearly worked for them, there's probably much more sense in them continuing with that same design and thought process rather than switching to something completely new, which they're not that familiar with. So if the gains or losses are minimal between the two different arrangements, stick with what you know, because you can continue to develop it with all the experience that you've had over the past year. Looking at this car from above then, what you can see here from this overhead shot is the fact that the nose cone narrows in here, as the front of the chassis narrows. It then opens up wide again to accommodate these two nostrils. And again, it's like having a plough on the front of the car scooping up airflow. You can really see exactly what it's doing from this overhead shot. It's almost got this opened up scoop on the front, shoveling air, very fast flowing air, of course, at the front of the car through into this underneath section here, where it's then passed through the turning vanes, turning outwards as it comes underneath the chassis, turning outwards towards these barge boards, little vanes and flick ups inside here, lots of serrations on these first set of barge boards here, all designed to reduce drag and spin up the airflow as it comes through. The airflow is following this kind of path all the way out here. Some of it's being channeled into this, the coolers, into the air intake at the side of the side pod. Some of it being sent around behind the barge boards to follow the contour of the chassis, of the bodywork, and all the way around towards the rear. These little winglets on here are slightly angled downwards, and the reason for that is they are collecting airflow or guiding airflow coming over the top of the front suspension or being upwashed off the front wing. The front wing sends all the air in a sort of upwards direction, gets passed up through here. The suspension, those suspension arms are also aerodynamic devices, all slightly angled downwards, trying to turn that upwash of airflow off there into more of a downwash as it comes back down, trying to guide it back down towards this area as I've described. And these two little vanes here, just trying to guide it back down and directly into the airbox, or the air intake rather, on the side of the side pod there. So everything's got a path. The airflow has a path all the way from front to the rear of the car, and all these devices are all part of that path, guiding it to the places that we need it to be. You can see the nice slimmed down Coke bottle area. That looks quite neat and tidy in there, as it was last year on this car as well. Lots of these tyre squirt slots on the back of the floor here. These are all really designed to start turning airflow in to protect the diffuser, because when we talk about tyre squirt, we're talking about the airflow that squirts out from the side in a sort of lateral movement as the rolling tyre contacts the floor of the racetrack. It spits airflow out to the side. What we really don't want is that tyre squirt, that lateral squirt of airflow, interrupting or interfering with this critical area of the diffuser underneath the back of the car. So these slots here are all about guiding airflow in here to try and protect, try and form this wall of air that will protect the diffuser from that tyre squirt. And teams are now putting more and more of these slots in, seeing more and more of a benefit of using this as an even more important device for getting the efficiency out of the diffuser. So nice little rolled detail on the side of the floor, again, that we've seen on lots of the cars. You can't see it too well from this overhead shot, but again, all about channeling the airflow through this undercut underneath the chassis side pod feeding it around, following the contours of this swoopy coat bottle, and then feeding it fast into the back of the diffuser and the back of the floor, where it's really used to massive downforce gains. I said this once before, but the diffuser gives you a huge amount of downforce. You know, everyone assumes that all the downforce on these cars comes from the big front and rear wings. It's not the case. Obviously, they do produce downforce, the rear wing more so than the front wing, but the diffuser is a huge part of that process. Really, really significant. This shot just shows you those little turning vanes, guide vanes that I talked about, slightly downward trajectory. As you can see, they're guiding that airflow. Any upwash coming off the front wing, anything coming off this front tyre, just trying to guide it back down towards this opening, which is the main cooler input for the radiators and the side pod there. As I said before, not gone the same route as some of the other teams. Mercedes have kind of gone more so this route, stuck with a more traditional side pod, and I guess when you consider the fact that this Force India is also running a Mercedes power unit, perhaps not too surprising that it has very similar cooling requirements to the Mercedes, for example, but also probably a sign that a team like Force India, with all the challenges of the 2018 car, like the adoption of the Halo, perhaps just haven't been able to put as much resource into detailing brand new, completely new concept side pods like some of the other teams have done in following Ferrari's lead from 2017. Some interesting detail on the mirrors. They've gone for this sort of swoopy out mirror on a long extension, as we've mentioned before, all designed to get around the vision of the vision impairment that the Halo brings you. So they have got to all be out a little bit further wide this year. But they've also got two little vertical vanes that are also attached to that mirror. So they're doing two jobs here. They're stabilising the mirror because it's on such a long stalk. It's very easy for it to vibrate and flap around. So they've put it on two little extensions, two little mounts. Probably don't need two in terms of the stability of the mirror, but these are also doing the job of being vortex generators, spinning up the airflow, energising the airflow to keep it attached to the side pod as it passes off down towards the rear. I think that's about it with this car. You know, it's a nice detail, but nothing revolutionary. But look, this has been the fourth best team for the last few years in Formula One. So they don't need to go revolutionary with their car. They have a great power unit. They've got a great team at Force India. They have maximised and optimised what they have had on a relative shoestring for the last few years and come up as the fourth best outside of Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull. That is an incredible achievement. So they don't need to go and do anything crazy. They need to keep doing what they're doing. And I think that's exactly the way they've approached this. I hope we're going to see another great year for Force India. The people's favourites, aren't they?